Okay, so a Muddy Waters campaign began in pretty much the last little slice of July, and the beginning of August, and towards the end of August, I filed again under the voluntary court. Okay, so I'm going to talk about the Muddy Waters campaign and how it had a bearing on not just the court case, but the perception, whether it was intentional or not on Kuchini's part, intentional or not on the part of, the inner circle guys. It had an effect on people's concept of whether or not filing suits against public officials was a wise thing to do. So I'm going to focus mostly on the Muddy Waters campaign. All right, so the short version of the Muddy Waters campaign is to gin up controversy where I become the center of that controversy. You can see the same kind of technique being used against Donald Trump twice. Okay, it was Hillary Clinton, for example, who had dealings with Russia, where she got paid to sell uranium to Russia. And she's the one doing back deals or backroom deals with foreign governments. Yet, when she's on the edge of being discovered, all she needs to be discovered is for Donald Trump to be sort of in charge of the government and pulling the levers of power for him to find out what she had been doing. In Alinsky fashion, she isolates the target. That's a Saul Alinsky tactic. Saul Alinsky wrote his book, dedicating his book on how to subvert and win power, subvert others and win power. He dedicated his book to the devil. So she employed this tactic where she accuses Donald Trump of being guilty of the same thing that she herself was guilty of. Now, the people watching, the people who may or may not realize that they have the power to vanquish bad players, the people watching get a little less convicted that they're going to punish Hillary Clinton, because why would you punish somebody for doing something that everybody seems to be doing it? And they seem a little bit less convicted to stand behind Donald Trump because he's got just as much dirt on him as everybody else, right? So what happens is the people watching lose all of their convictions, and that's the point of the tactic. It's to take away the convictions of the people watching. And that's why I'm bothering to talk about this angle from August of 2017, because, most people don't realize that government officials are using Alinsky tactics to target their the subconscious reckoning devices in their mind, how they reckon out who's good and who's bad. Before they consciously even make an assessment of who's good and who's bad, these Alinskyite tactics are already at work on purpose because of people who understand the way human beings tend to, meter out justice and measure right and wrong. So this is a Muddy Waters tactic. Another place you can see the Muddy Waters tactic. It's clear that, Biden and his son were being given favors, and Biden's on record as saying he squeezed the Ukrainian government to cause a prosecutor to get fired who was squeezing the company that was giving him and his son money. Anyway, when Donald Trump's people start, figuring out, hey, let's go to Ukraine to see what's going on, somebody takes a really benign audio clip from a conversation that Trump is having with the president of Ukraine, and they decide to color that as if Donald Trump is asking for a favor. And this asking of a favor is painted out as if it is, collusion with Ukraine against a political opponent. Well, what is Joe Biden? Is Joe Biden primarily a criminal if he committed a crime, or primarily a political opponent? If he's a political opponent, does that mean he can't be or shouldn't be investigated for crimes that he actually did? Is being a political opponent or being in a political race, wouldn't that make you immune to not only being investigated, but being found guilty? Because the counterclaim could be made that you only wanted to find me guilty because we were in a political race together. So this type of confusion about what's morally right and wrong is actually done on purpose by diabolical people. They actually intend to confuse the electorate, because the electorate is on the edge of being convicted about the fact that they had done wrong. So they would rather put the electorate in a state of confusion because, you know, confusion is sort of like a midway position. The electorate is on the edge of actually finding out the truth. So people do these kinds of things, and it's my belief that out of the woodwork, all at once, late July and throughout August, a Muddy Waters campaign had begun, not only at my expense, but I do believe that the reason why other people didn't file, and the reason why nobody really dares talk about or talk against the government or inner circle of Sanctuary Church, is because, hey, if you chop the head off of the toughest guy in the room, nobody's going to stand up to fight you next. Okay? So I do believe that this was done on purpose. So, all right. So one of the first things that happened was that, in defense of his claim that Chunoguk doesn't exist, Tim went on to explain why he thinks the Chunoguk doesn't exist and ridicule people that were on my side, calling those people Jamalites or Jamalists or something like that. And, you know, that's marginalizing rhetoric because it sounds silly. If you're a Jamalite, you foolishly are following this limited quantity called Jamal. You're not following God. You're not following principle. You're just following Jamal. So it is minimizing, and it marginalizes me and this entire group in a sense, or in a sense. And you get the sense that we're not necessarily connected to principle. So, yeah, that tactic was employed by Tim Elder. We gave him a good fight, and I believe that, you know, we showed that Father had been saying, come on, all we have to do is point out, all we have to do is point out the fact that the family pledge begins with, I, so-and-so, owner of Chunoguk. All we have to do is point out how in January of 2001, True Father said that the long-awaited kingdom, right? That's the kingdom spoken about even in the Bible, had been finally here, even if you have a hard time believing it. I'm paraphrasing, but Father did say that in January of 2001. So there are plenty of quotes where Father is saying that he started that nation. So we also were given cards. We were also given citizenship cards. You had a couple of brothers even put their citizenship card online, pictures of them. Okay? So these are not to be confused with the citizenship cards that were given out in 2013. These were the citizenship cards given out in 2006. Okay? All right, so, I mean, he just loses right there. So he can't ridicule us, but he did in his mind anyway. He went through all the motions of ridiculing us anyway. And instead of it being based in principle, it was quite arbitrary. Now, why did he push forward and do this anyway? Because I believe that impressionable minds who are not confident about the principle were being targeted. Because if a guy like this looks like he still holds on to his confidence in his position, there's some people who haven't worked it out, and they'll think, oh, he must be right. Oh, he must have a point in all of this stuff that I really don't study and I really don't understand. I'll reserve judgment. So that was one thing that happened. Another thing that happened, so that they could go and quote-unquote report to Hyungjanim about how atrocious I am, people did various things to bait me into conflict. Okay? So, Panzer. So Panzer gets online, and one of the things that he says is that I shouldn't call anyone a bitch. I should call no woman a bitch. And so he sort of left us in that regard, in that, you know, women, even if they're being bitchy, technically speaking, a bitch is a person who incessantly complains, right? So I get bitchy from time to time. Some people may even say that these videos are bitchy. I don't mind. Sometimes being bitchy strategically or being bitchy with good ammo can actually be a good thing. It can actually serve a purpose. But being bitchy as like an emotional nutcase, well, that's really, you know, that's kind of like being unhinged. Well, sometimes people, when they're unhinged, will get called a bitch. Somebody who thinks, oh, I should never be opposed, and they can't stop railing against their opponents, that person is being kind of bitchy because they don't know how to close their mouth because their favorite person themselves was slighted in some way, and so they become a bitch. Okay, this is a very finite thing for me. It's very clear. Sometimes I'm a bitch. Sometimes, you name it. Anybody you know can become some form of a bitch, whether rational or irrational. Anyway, I'm very clear about that. But so he says to me, if somebody wanted to call your wife a bitch, do we have your permission to, is that okay for us to call her a bitch? So this guy was trying to get me to set the condition of either issuing some kind of statement that's contradiction, right? So if I don't give permission to call her a bitch, then I'm a hypocrite for calling other women in the community bitch. But if I do, and I'm not sure whether he saw this angle, but if I do give him permission to call my own wife a bitch, then I've just actually set the condition of not being my wife's protector, and I'm giving like a blanket open, right, permission about this kind of thing to my wife. So what I did was I took the center of that question off of me, and I turned it on to his wife, and I said, hey, if your wife is being a bitch, okay, you can decide whether or not people can call her a bitch. And by giving that answer, I was basically saying there is a rational reason why somebody gets called a bitch, and if you're the center of that case, you have to make those choices for yourself. Okay, so the women that he was defending were not women in his immediate family. And if he wanted to say, if you ever call, his wife a bitch, he's going to do this and do that, he's going to defend her. But anyway, I thought he was trying to get under my skin. I thought he was trying to draft me out to be a hypocrite. I would never give, under any circumstances, a blanket permission, especially online, to the masses to call my wife a bitch. I wouldn't do that. Now, that's all I'm going to say about that. But in life, if somebody's being a bitch, people tend to call them a bitch. Okay? And that's all I'm going to say about that. I really didn't appreciate the opportunity that he gave me to give blanket permission to my own lady. Okay? I wish he would approach that differently. Anyway, he started in on me, trying to paint me out to be hypocritical. And I pretty much think that I slipped that punch because, he knows that, he knows where I was coming from. But he was trying to trap me. And I didn't appreciate that coming from him because I had worked for him for 10 years for shit money. Okay? So maybe he had no respect for me there. Maybe I should have left him a long time ago. Anyway, then this one brother, Scott, he decided to come after me over a contrived issue. He said that I ran an ostracism campaign against Somia. Now, I think he was trying to create a beef between me and Somia because I had never actually had a beef with Somia, and I still don't have a beef with Somia. Maybe I'll talk about Somia later, and all the things I'd have to say about Somia are all pretty much good. So, but he was trying to be an advocate for Somia in light of me having done something to her that I never did. I never ran an ostracism campaign against Somia. So what I told Scott was that I had run an ostracism campaign against him and his family because he wouldn't be clear, nor his wife, about the fact that his Jacob children, who were conceived outside the realm of the blessing, are not blessed children. And I thought one of the worst things that's going to happen is somebody's going to fall in love with one of those kids thinking that they are in the realm of blessed children, and then they're going to find out later on, after the emotional claws are already sunk in, that this person is not a blessed child. And I believe that they would let it go on and forever. Now I run the risk of getting this guy to come out of the woodwork and talk about me, and I'm not really wanting to talk about him. I'm just saying that in August this problem opened up. It could have been as late as September, but this problem opened up. It began opening up right around the same time. So interestingly enough, a guy named John, he tells me that I better come to church. Why? Because I'd only been coming to church maybe 3 times a month back then, or maybe I skipped a week or so. And he says, you better come to church or your wife and kids are going to something like abandon you, or they're going to rebel against you. Something like that. Now, mind you, my wife and my kids are away from church, and because we stopped going to church, but he doesn't know me, and he doesn't understand how difficult it is to be a fourth Adam, to have a post-church mindset, and to live among a bunch of people who don't know we're supposed to be trying to figure out how to be Moonies in a post-church era. There's very little help. I mean, I remember days where there were very few people who understood the era of fourth Adam. But my family went through all of that. So this guy doesn't know who he's talking to, or the people in the family that he's talking about. And in my assessment, a lot of people don't go do tribal messiah work because they don't have permission. And so, you know, I said to him, you know, maybe your wife is that kind of a social prostitute, goes wherever the people give her permission to go. I don't know his wife, but I'm speaking hypothetically like that to make a point to him. I really don't. As far as I've ever seen, her spirit really looks great. You know, I really don't know the lady, but I was making a point. And he decided to either feign outrage that I said that as a retort, or he actually lost his cool. Okay, the guy started calling me hood rat. You notice, like, being called a hood rat. Hood rat is borderline racist. I remember Kristen Quinn saying that sounds quite racist, because I'm only one of the few black guys in the movement. And it's not because I'm black that I can tell people exactly what I think, and I can say even tough sounding or harsh sounding things. It's because as a fourth Adam, I realized that, you know, in the Restoration era, specifically for the issue of seeking natural surrender, you should feel obligated to love Cain. So I no longer feel obligated to love Cain. I love Cain when I want to. And Father mentioned this as the power of the elder brother. We are now in the elder brother's position, the elder son's position. So instead of being obligated to love Cain, we have the freedom to love Cain. We have the position of power where we can choose to or not. And I've known that for a long time. And this is why I can talk tough. And this is why I can pick and choose who I'm going to be affectionate to, who I'm going to give allegiance to, because I don't feel obligated to do these things. And that's really, it's not that I'm a hood rat. It's that I've awakened a long time ago this executive function where I choose, sometimes, many times strategically, who I'm going to give love and affection to. So he did not qualify for me to say anything nice to him, given the fact that he talked about something that's very sensitive. What father would want their family to rebel against him? I didn't think that was nice, so I hit back. But he couldn't take the punch because he's going around the church going, Jamal called my wife a prostitute. I didn't exactly call his wife a prostitute. I said, you know, doing things socially the way you can't stand up for your principles is the way of a prostitute. Maybe you should ask your wife about that. That's what I said. And I know it's kind of zinger to it. But anyway, that's the way I am. So what happened was, Richard's still going on talking about language and how I use language and everything. Yeah, so Hyunjin and we had the occasion to talk during that time. And he was talking about how all these people are starting to buzz about how I am. You know, I'm rude, unloving, this kind of thing. And I told him, I said, Hyunjin, they're baiting me. They're seeding the conversation so that they know how I'll act. They don't know why I act that way, but they're toying with me anyway. So, you know, I do give them warnings. The other thing I do is, you know, I won't pull my punches especially after I give warnings. And so he said he seemed to notice and be aware of the tactic of baiting someone into defending themselves or feeling an urge to make their point, and then making that person look like they're nothing but a ball of anger. So he seemed to understand that tactic, and he said, okay. So, yeah. So those were some of the muddy waters tactics. I do believe that they were trying to erode whatever support had been, you know, baking since July, and people are pretty emotionalist. So to some slight degree, their campaign, I don't know, may have been successful, but not. I don't think so. Not so much. It seemed over time to have more effect on the family of Yeonanim. The people who seem to like snarl a little bit more or make unpleasant faces more and more were her family, and this fed into one of them saying by October that they didn't want to chaperone my kids. If Jamal's kids are going to Cambodia, I don't want to go. So my kids wound up not going to Thailand and Cambodia Vietnam, wherever they were planning to go. They had fundraised, selling pastries every Sunday at the church for more than half a year to go to this place. But even my kids opted not to go because they didn't want to go with people that, you know, were going to disrespect me or feel nasty towards them or not enjoy their company. So my kids wound up not going to a trip that they fundraised for 6 months. Now, I want to talk about something. People can say that, you know, I'm rough and I'm rude and this kind of thing. But I'll really say this. If you're my friend, you know that I know how to invest in people, whether that costs me money, sweat, time. I invest in people. So I'm not an unloving person. I'm straightforward. I don't play this sort of like game to make you feel like you're more all right, because it's sort of a distraction. So sometimes I feel like I'm serving you by coming straight to the point. And like I said, the other thing is, whereas a lot of people who come from the official Old Testament, New Testament, or even the third Adam's realm, which was the recreation of the Old and New Testament foundation, right? You know what it's like to have to give all things to Cain in order to bring about a natural surrender. And so you feel obligated to be extra nice. But me, when you've given me no reason to be nice, when you've actually assumed that, I should love a third person, and you jump into the conversation, which happened online a lot. A lot of people would jump in and say, Jamal, in a sense, Jamal, be nice, right? And I'm like, no, my love belongs to me. It doesn't belong to you. I can actually choose based on a strategy or based on a desired outcome, because we are debating here. We've been debating since 2015 in the sanctuary about specific things. I'm not going to back off a really decent point that I'm making because the other person is feigning outrage. So if the onlookers can't see that this person is feigning outrage, I mean, I just wade right through that. I don't spend time trying to win the gallery. If I think somebody's being a snake by employing some kind of emotionalist, win the crowd, get pity points from the crowd tactic, I don't spend time acting like it's real. And when people see me not spending time acting like it's real, they think I'm a cold-hearted bully. But I'm not a cold-hearted bully. I can actually see that this person is actually, on the inside, not outraged. And what would happen is, people would be outraged for the other person. And then I do believe that form of outrage may be even sometimes more real than the person who's pretending to be outraged. Because the person who goes to their defense actually believes that this person needs help. So, in a sense, that's more respectable. But I'd cut those people down too, because I need to stay on my point, and I need to, in front of all the people that are watching, I need to not look like I backed off the principle of the matter. Now, you look at the comedian Kevin Hart. He wanted to do the Oscars. So somebody picked out a tweet from 10 years ago and said that he was homophobic. He said, I'm not going to rehash something I said 10 years ago when I've grown in 10 years. That's ridiculous. The fact that I'm doing the Oscars this year is really not related to a tweet that I did 10 years ago. So he should have stayed on that line and not really breathed his breath of life into their narrative. But he went around 3 weeks later and he apologized. So what this does is make the homosexual community look like they actually have more of a principled foundation, because people are backing off of the fight, right? And it gives the impression to people who aren't that intellectual or argumentative, it gives the impression that the argument's been settled and the smart people must have figured out that the gay people have a good point. That's the effect. So this is why I don't back off. This is why when some tender-hearted sister who thinks, I'm going to go in there and I'm going to set this boy straight, I'm talking about older sister, she doesn't know that what's at stake is that she's asking me to weaken my position, and she's going for the idea that this person needs my love. And I would say many times, this person is a blessed person. This person, if this person has lack of love, or this person is thrown into a state of lack of love because of something I said, then their relationship with the blessing must be very weak, because nobody should feel lack of love if they properly perceive the value of what they already received from the Messiah. So I said the whole conversation where third parties are worried about the way we fight, as if one of us is going to be rendered, in some sort of a, I don't know, inoperable state where we can't function anymore because of us being cold or us being harsh. I mean, that whole concept is anemic. It's sick. Because no, we all should be able to take it if we're adults. And I shouldn't feel obligated to love a person when they're screwing some principle up really bad. And people were defending the fact that Hak Ja Han changed Father's book, and I'm like, they really ought to lose this argument, and I really ought to press the merits of the argument instead of playing this kumbaya demonstrating that I love them first. I'm like, no, we can get past that because God and true parents loved them way more than I could, and they should rest on that. Okay, so people don't understand why I just push through brothers and sisters. I push through brothers and sisters because all of that leftist tactic, calling me unloving. You see, it passes gay marriage. It allows the migrants to invade Europe, this kind of thing. I'm already aware because Father said, if people who don't know that restoration is over, allow Satan to continue to act. And this is how. If you don't know that we're not in an era where you're supposed to prove this or that, you continuing paying down on that debt. You continue trying to prove that you're this or that in an era where it's no longer necessary for you to do that. It's no longer necessary for you to seek a natural surrender based on giving everything you have, even walking away from your sense of right and wrong and righteousness just to coddle someone. Okay? So, I'm not at my core mean. And if you want to go on believing that, that's one thing. But I'm setting the record straight right here that muddy waters tactic worked on people who don't understand why I am the way that I am. And they would have to understand the era after the coming of heaven. They would have to understand the era after restoration, which I've been studying for quite some time. And when they catch up to understanding, they will go, oh, I understand. Because you know what? You're not going to get ahead. You're not going to get ahead in this nation. You're not going to get ahead in this world if you feel obligated to love someone who accuses you of being unloving, because they will never release you. They will never say that you love them enough. That's why gay marriage got passed. That's why the migrants are raping people all up and down Europe right now. So this is not the era of New Testament age Christianity. It's the era for completed Testament age Christianity. It's the era for direct dominion Christianity. Direct dominion Christianity owns, the people own their love. Okay, they don't withdraw love to be mean. They withdraw their love and support strategically. Okay, because they're emotionally stable, and they're emotionally stable, inoculated against false sickness, as Father said, because they have received the greatest love. And a person who's received the greatest love, it's grotesque for them to go around asking for more love or testing people for whether or not they too love them. You know, don't you love me too? Oh, you don't? I have to reckon with you until you love me. I mean, that's childish. I'll say it clearly. That is from the growth stage. That is for spiritual teenagers. Okay, so this muddy waters tactic was designed, whether Kukshanim and his minions know it or not, it only exacerbated the spiritual teenagers. And I'm sure if he had to do it again, thinking, oh, I don't mind setting the spiritual teenagers on his behind, maybe he would. But I later told him that all those people ginning up stuff against me, it's pretty much irrelevant when the central theme of the court filing was whether or not the public official could be held accountable. Wow. But what they set in motion is the fact that the public official doesn't have to be accountable if you're mean. So, and mean is in the eye of the beholder. It's quite arbitrary. It is quite arbitrary. So it's not principled. So this arbitrary, always changing standard of niceness or meanness is actually put in a subject position by these people's tactics. And the concept of holding your worker, the public official, to account, which can be done according to rules, principles, and these kinds of things, that was placed in the secondary position because, like I said before, even when the court, I had dropped the court case months later, Richard Panzer, the next day, comes smiling in my face, one of the biggest smiles I'd ever seen him render in 10 years. And I'm like, you're happy. You're happy that the process of holding the public official to account was thwarted or came to an end before its proper end. So anyway, August was about those tactics being employed.